Hello! This is not really about music today, but about the Commodore 64 and SID chips. So, some of you might know that I love 8-bit music and vintage computers, and my favorite vintage computer is, of course, the Commodore 64. This came out in 1982, so it's 44-year-old technology. And I had one as a kid, and I loved it for many reasons. One of the reasons I loved it is the sound. The sound started with a chip, the so-called SID chip. I'm going to put on some gloves now. The SID chip is this chip that is the foundation for the Commodore 64 sound and the chiptune sound as we know it today. This one, this is the original. The SID sound interface device, or also called MOS 6581. And this chip that I'm holding in my hand is from 1982. It's the first one that was actually built into Commodore 64 computers in the 1980s. It's revision 3 of the chip. Why revision 3? Revision 1 and 2 were only prototypes. They existed in the lab only, and the first Commodore 64s that came out had this one, 6581 revision 3. And it sounds incredible, crunchy, wild, distorted, unpredictable. And musicians love that. Musicians love it when an instrument behaves in a way that you can't always predict and isn't always that stable, like an analog synthesizer that changes its behavior based on temperature and all kinds of quirks that it has. So this is like an analog synthesizer on a chip, and it had a little bug, and the bug caused even more unpredictability. And then Commodore later made other revisions of the chip. The original was from 1982, this one is from 1991. It's also a SID, it's called the 8580R5. And this one, it sounds clearly like a SID. It is crunchy, it is dirty. Never let anybody tell you that it's clean. It is a SID, but it has a lower noise floor, and it has more predictability, so it has advantages and disadvantages. When you program it, you know what's coming out of this filter more. I also have a rarity. Let me show you this. Some people don't even believe that this exists. Do you see the number? It's the 6582A. What? Let me show you again. 6582A. Yeah, it exists. This chip was built by Commodore in 1992, and it was meant as a spare part, but it never actually ended up in Commodore 64s much. Some third parties used it for other instruments and for sound cards, and it sounds like an 8580. But it has the filter characteristics of the 6581 too. It's very rare, and I'm quite happy that I have one. And I have some more, but I will talk about those later. Let me tell you about my computers. So this one here, this is a breadbin with an original Commodore motherboard inside, of course, but I extended the motherboard with an expansion called SID FX3, which allows me to place 2 SID chips into it, and this one has a 6581 revision 4 inside and an 8580 R5. The 6581 R4 sounds like the R3, but it has a lower noise floor, so it's a bit less distracting noise-wise. And I love having both a 6581 and an 8580 in one computer. It gives me 6 voices, and I have the characteristics of 2 different chips. This is another breadbin that I heavily use. You heard it at the beginning of this video. And this has also 2 SID chips, a 6581 R3 from 1984 and the 8580 R5. And it was easy to place 2 SID chips into this one. I didn't have to modify much because I replaced the whole main board The main board of this machine was broken. Actually, I got the bare bone bread bin, and I wanted to place a main board into it to revive the bread bin. And so I got the Ultimate 64 Elite mainboard. That's a new Commodore 64 mainboard that you can buy today. It's being made today by Gideon. Amazing, because it has 2 sockets for SID chips, and I love working with it. Here I have something nice. This is the SID Station. It's a synthesizer based on the 6581. And this was actually the first synthesizer that Electron ever made in the early 1990s. Electron is a company today that musicians all over the world love and use. And this was the first instrument they ever made. And this one is even from the first production run. It has MIDI and decent audio out and audio in. A pleasure to work with this. It's amazing. I'm putting on my second glove. I told you about the 6582, which is rare. Here I have another thing that's interesting. This is not an original SID chip. That's a modern recreation called the Swin SID. And it's nice to have because you can place it in a Commodore 64 when it has a broken SID and you don't have an original anymore. And some companies use this. This is called the Swin SID. It sounds a bit like an 8580, but cleaner. So many people don't like it. But some people use it very well, like this company, Mode Machines. They built an instrument called the Mode Machines SID. And that's a groove box with a Swin SID inside, and it sounds amazing, and it's fun to program. You program it like an old Roland TB303 synthesizer. And if you want to, you can replace the Swin SID with a real 6581 or 8580. So that's awesome. Here I have some more Commodore 64 computers. This one is a C64G. And the C64G came out in the early 1990s in Germany and Austria, and it was sold in supermarkets. This one was marketed as Video Super Game 64, which is a weird name for a computer, but they tried to sell it like that for a while. I have it because it's rare. The white bread bin, it has a white bread bin, you see, but a black dark brown keyboard. That's unusual, and that was only in the Video Super Game 64 version. That's one of the reasons I have it. It's rare, and it has an 8580 SID inside, which is the second reason I bought it. Well, actually the main reason. So the supermarket C64s of the early 90s usually looked like this, not like this. This was the so-called Aldi Commodore 64. And it was sold by Aldi in Germany and Hofer in Austria. Hofer is the Austrian version of Aldi. And this one is legendary, all white, but sadly mine doesn't have a SID chip inside and not even a main board. Oh no, I got this bare bones, and I'm planning to revive this Aldi C64 by placing an Ultimate 64 mainboard inside, same as I did here. Bring it back to life. Here is another old bread bin with a 6581 chip inside. I don't know if it's an R3 or maybe an R4, because the guy I bought it from put a heatsink onto the chip, which is nice. It preserves the life of the SID. But I didn't want to tear it off to see what version the chip is. Assuming that it's an R3 because of the sound it makes. The R3 sounds a little bit more noisy than the R4, and this machine is quite noisy and crunchy. Here I have a British Commodore 64, also with a 6581 R3. This should have a brown keyboard, but somebody swapped that out, probably because it was broken. Looks kind of nice. Yeah, here are some more computers. This is a German Commodore 64 with a 6581R3. This is one with a 6581R3. And this one is a 6581R3, but this one is from 1983 and this is from 1984. And believe it or not, they sound different. There are many reasons for that. The SID chips really sounded different from year to year because of the way that the wafers were made and the dirt that happened maybe on the silicon, but also the capacitors and the main boards changed. And now these machines age, and with some of them I put in new capacitors like these two machines. But here I didn't. This one has 40-year-old capacitors inside, and that changes the character of the sound. The SID chip itself ages and the capacitors. So think, if you really want to replace capacitors on your machines, like I did on this and this computer, that makes them live longer and they sound really good, but you might lose some character that you liked about the old machine based on the old capacitors. Yeah. Here I have an incredible musical keyboard from Sight and Sound. This is also hard to find. You can place it on top of a breadbin like this. Yay. And then you can play. I hope you liked my little video about my Commodore 64s and the SID chip. I keep using these. Some of my techno music has SID sounds in it, and my hip hop beats. You will hear bass lines, lead sounds based on these fantastic old computers and chips, the SID Station. I am planning to hook up the SID Station to this C64 next and to my MC707 Groove box. And then we will have some fun with that. I think it will sound pretty good. Here, by the way, I have an original TB303 from Roland, the original bassline synthesizer that created acid music and techno in the 1980s. That's where techno comes from. Using this together with the Commodore 64 is pure 1980s mayhem and nostalgia. I love it. So next time I will show you some of my music instruments, my synthesizers. But today we are all about the Commodore 64. I'm operator Burst Up. I love making music and dabbling around with these old machines, and I hope you enjoyed this little excursion into my 8-bit craziness. Bye! I also love bicycles, lol.